The umbrella was blue silk, vintage, and still smelled faintly of rain and something darker, something like old parchment and winter nights. Kira Jensen held it up to the lamplight in her small antiquarian map shop, watching dust motes swirl in the golden glow. The customer who'd left it had been gone for 20 minutes now, vanished into the Portland drizzle without a backward glance. She'd noticed him the moment he'd entered, impossibly tall, white hair pulled back in a neat tie, skin so pale it seemed to drink the light rather than reflect it. His eyes had been steel gray, ancient somehow, though his face appeared no older than 30. He'd commissioned a restoration. A 16th-century atlas of Eastern Europe, the pages brittle as butterfly wings, the ink faded to ghosts of what they'd once been. He'd spoken perhaps 10 words total. "Can you restore this?" A pause while she examined it. "How long?" Another pause. "I'll return." His voice had been deep, accented with something she couldn't place, something that predated modern borders. Now she stood alone in her shop, surrounded by the familiar smell of old paper and leather bindings, holding his umbrella like a talisman. The sensible thing would be to set it aside, wait for him to realize, and come back. But Kira had learned long ago that she wasn't always sensible. She'd left a steady museum job to open this tiny shop wedged between a coffeehouse and a vintage bookstore. She worked with fragments of worlds that no longer existed, coaxing them back to life with patience and steady hands. She looked at the umbrella again. The handle was carved wood, smooth from years of use, the craftsmanship exquisite. This wasn't something you left behind by accident, unless you wanted a reason to see someone again. The thought made her pulse quicken, ridiculous as it was. Men who looked like walking Gothic novels didn't engineer excuses to see map restores with ink-stained fingers and hair that never quite stayed in its bun. Still, she found herself smiling as she propped the umbrella by the door, a silent promise that she'd keep it safe until he returned. If he returned. She turned back to the atlas he'd left, spreading it carefully on her workbench. The maps were incredible, even in their damaged state, hand-drawn territories with notations in Latin and what looked like medieval Romanian. But as she examined them more closely under her magnifying lamp, she noticed something odd. The routes marked weren't major roads or trade routes. They were smaller paths, winding through forests and mountains, with tiny symbols she didn't recognize marking certain locations. Kira photographed each page methodically, her mind already cataloging the work needed. New backing for the most damaged leaves, careful cleaning of the vellum, ink stabilization, possibly some inpainting where the losses were small enough. Months of work, which meant months of appointments, of seeing him again. She glanced at the umbrella. Worth it, she decided. The rain had stopped by the time she locked up for the night, but the streets gleamed wet under the streetlights. She lived above the shop, a small apartment that smelled perpetually of conservator's adhesive and the lavender candles she burned to cover it. She made tea, tried to read, found herself thinking about steel gray eyes instead. 3 days passed. The umbrella stayed by the door. She worked on other projects, a surveyor's map from the Oregon Trail era, a nautical chart with water damage, a gorgeous 18th century celestial atlas. But she kept the 16th century Romanian atlas on her main workbench, visible from the shop's front window. On the 4th evening, just as the autumn sun was setting and turning her shop windows to amber, the bell above the door chimed. He stood in the threshold like something out of a pre-Raphaelite painting, backlit by the dying light. He wore black again, a long coat that might have been from any century, perfectly tailored. His white hair was loose this time, falling past his shoulders, making him look even more otherworldly. His eyes found the umbrella immediately. "You kept it," he said. Those were the first words, spoken soft enough that she almost missed them. "You left it," Kira replied, standing from her workbench. Her heart was doing something complicated in her chest. "I thought you might come back for it." "I did." He stepped inside, and she caught that scent again, parchment and winter, and underneath something wilder, like forests at midnight. He moved with absolute economy, no wasted motion, until he stood before her workbench. "The atlas?" "I've started the assessment." She gestured to her notes, her photographs. "It's going to take time. The damage is extensive but not irreparable. I'll need to source period-appropriate materials for the backing, and the ink analysis alone will take weeks to make sure I match it correctly." He listened without interrupting, his gaze moving between her face and her hands as she spoke. When she finished, he nodded once. Time doesn't concern me. A pause. I trust your skill. You don't know anything about my skill, Kira said, then immediately wondered if she should have just accepted the compliment. Something flickered in his expression, not quite a smile, but close. I know enough. You were recommended. By whom? Someone who also values preservation. He reached into his coat and withdrew a card case, silver and antique. From it, he produced a business card with a single name embossed in elegant script, Dominik Draven. Below it, a phone number. Nothing else. Is that a first name or last name? She asked, taking the card. Both, either. He tilted his head slightly, studying her. You may call me Dominik. Kira, she offered, though he hadn't asked. Kira Jensen. I know. At her surprised look, he added, It's on your door. Right. Obviously. An awkward silence stretched between them, but it wasn't entirely uncomfortable. He seemed content to simply stand there, watching her with those ancient eyes. She found herself noticing details, the way his coat fit across his shoulders, the silver ring on his right hand engraved with symbols she didn't recognize, the fact that his chest didn't seem to move with breath. Your umbrella, she said finally, gesturing toward it. He glanced at it, then back at her. Keep it. The forecast calls for rain. I have an umbrella. Then you'll have two. He turned toward the door, then paused. I'd like to see the progress. May I return in a week? Her mouth answered before her brain caught up. Yes. Thursday evening, if that works. I close at 6, but I'm usually here later. Thursday. He inclined his head, a gesture that felt courtly, old-fashioned. Then he was gone, the bell chiming softly in his wake. Kira stood very still for a long moment, then looked down at the business card in her hand. She turned it over. The back was blank except for a small embossed symbol, a crown over a crescent moon. She filed it carefully in her desk drawer and went back to work, but she found herself glancing at the umbrella every few minutes, smiling without quite knowing why. Thursday came wrapped in fog. Kira had made significant progress on the atlas, carefully separating the pages and stabilizing the most fragile sections. She discovered more of those strange symbols, always marking what appeared to be caves or dense forest areas. Her curiosity itched like a healing wound, but she respected the privacy of her clients. People brought her all kinds of maps for all kinds of reasons. 6 o'clock arrived. She flipped the sign to closed but left the door unlocked, made tea without thinking about it, then realized she'd made 2 cups. 6:15. The fog pressed against her windows like something living. 6:20. The bell chimed. Dominik entered as silently as before, but this time his eyes went first to her face, then to the umbrella still propped by the door, and only then to the workbench. He was dressed similarly, black on black, silver accents, that air of barely contained power. Tea? Kira offered, lifting one of the cups. He looked at it for a long moment. Thank you, but I don't drink tea. Coffee? I don't drink coffee either. She set the cup down, feeling foolish. Water? No. He moved to the workbench, his attention settling on the atlas pages she'd laid out. Show me. So she did, walking him through her process, explaining the cleaning trials she'd done, the backing papers she'd sourced from a supplier in Italy. He listened with absolute focus, asking occasional questions that showed he understood far more about archival conservation than most people. His hands never touched the maps, she noticed, always stopping just short, hovering as if the contact might burn. You care about them, he said after she'd finished. Of course. They're pieces of history, windows into how people understood their world. Even when that understanding was incomplete? Especially then. Kira touched the edge of one map gently. The gaps are as important as what's there. They show us what people feared, what they dreamed about, what they couldn't yet reach. He was quiet for a long moment, watching her rather than the maps, then. You see them as I do. How do you see them? As proof that we existed, that we navigated, that we survived. The pronoun choice struck her as odd, but before she could question it, he stepped back from the workbench. I'm satisfied with your progress. Continue as you see fit. That's it? You came all this way just for a 5-minute update? I came all this way, Dominik said carefully, because you have something of mine. Her heart jumped. The atlas, you mean? His eyes flicked to the umbrella. Yes, the atlas. Oh. Oh. Kira felt heat rise in her cheeks. Do you want it back? The umbrella, I mean? Do you want me to take it back? This conversation felt like walking a tightrope in the dark. I don't mind keeping it safe. Then I'll leave it in your care. He moved toward the door, then paused again, his hand on the frame. Kira Jensen. Yes? The forecast still calls for rain. Use it if you need it. Then he was gone again, dissolving into the fog like he'd never been there at all. Kira locked the door behind him and leaned against it, her pulse racing. This was absurd. She barely knew him. He barely spoke. And yet she was already counting the days until next Thursday. She looked at the umbrella, then at the card in her desk drawer, then at the maps spread across her workbench with their mysterious symbols and hidden routes. Something was happening here, something that felt bigger than a simple restoration job. But Kira had always been drawn to mysteries, to puzzles that required patience and careful hands to solve. She went back to work, smiling. The pattern established itself over the following weeks. Every Thursday at 6:20, Dominik would arrive. Sometimes he'd stay for 10 minutes, sometimes for an hour. Their conversations remained sparse, but grew slowly warmer. She learned that he'd traveled extensively, that he spoke at least 7 languages, that he had opinions on Renaissance cartography that could have filled textbooks. She learned that he never ate or drank in her presence, that he moved without sound, that his skin was always cool when his hand accidentally brushed hers, reaching for the same magnifying glass one evening. She learned that his rare smiles were worth waiting for. And she learned, though he never said it directly, that he was coming for more than just the atlas. The umbrella became a fixture, a private joke between them. It rained frequently that autumn, Portland being Portland, and sometimes she'd use it running errands, amused by the thought of carrying a piece of him through the wet streets. It smelled like him now, that winter and parchment scent. It was November, nearly 8 weeks into the restoration, when things shifted. Kira had been struggling with a particularly damaged map, one that showed the Carpathian Mountains in intricate detail. The symbols here were more numerous, marking dozens of locations with what she'd come to think of as the crescent crown mark. On impulse, she'd cross-referenced it with modern topographical maps, curious about what those locations looked like now. Caves, every single one. Deep cave systems, some explored, many not. Her phone rang, making her jump. Unknown number. Hello? Miss Jensen? This is Detective Sarah Walsh with Portland PD. I'm calling about your business. Do you restore old maps and documents? Kira's stomach tightened. Yes. Is something wrong? Nothing wrong. We just need some expertise. We've had a series of break-ins at historical societies and private collections up and down the coast. The thief seems to be targeting very specific items, old maps, primarily Eastern European. We're trying to establish a pattern. Would you be willing to look at an inventory and give us your professional opinion? Of course. When do you need me? Would tomorrow morning work? 10 a.m. at the downtown precinct? Kira agreed and hung up, her mind racing. She looked at the atlas on her workbench, at those marked caves, and felt something cold settle in her stomach. When Dominik arrived that Thursday, she told him about the detective's call. His reaction was subtle but definite, a tightening around his eyes, a stillness that became somehow more still. What did you tell them? That I'd help. Why? She studied his face. Dominik, what are these maps really showing? Exactly what they appear to show. Routes, safe passages. Safe for whom? He held her gaze for a long moment. People who need to travel unseen. What kind of people? The kind, he said slowly, who can't afford to be found. Kira's breath caught. The pieces were clicking together in a way that should have seemed impossible, but somehow wasn't. The pale skin, the lack of eating or drinking, the chest that didn't rise with breath the way he only ever visited after dark, those ancient eyes. You're not human, she said, not a question. Dominik went very still. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. Vampire. The word felt strange in her mouth, too much like fiction, like movies and books and things that weren't supposed to be real. Yes, she should have been afraid. should have run, screamed something. Instead, she found herself stepping closer, examining him with the same careful attention she gave damaged manuscripts. The maps mark safe places for your kind, caves where you can shelter during daylight. Yes. And someone is stealing similar maps. Horror dawned. Someone is hunting you. Hunting my people, yes. He hadn't moved, letting her process, letting her choose. For centuries we've kept our roots secret, passed down through trusted cartographers and archivists. But in recent years several have been compromised. Hunters are finding refuges that should be unknown, waiting for daylight when we're vulnerable. And you brought your atlas to me. I brought it to you, Dominik said quietly, because you were recommended by someone I trust, because your work shows reverence for history, for preservation, because I needed the roots restored and updated, and I believed I could trust you. And the umbrella? Something flickered across his face that almost smiled. The umbrella was an excuse. I wanted to see you again. Kira's heart did something complicated. Why? Because when you talked about gaps in maps being as important as what's shown, I thought you might understand what it means to exist in the spaces others don't see. He took a breath he didn't need, a gesture she suspected was habit from a lifelong past. Because you have gentle hands and you treat broken things like they deserve to be whole. Because I've lived a very long time, Kira Jensen, and I haven't wanted to know someone this much in decades. The confession hung between them like smoke. The detective wants me to look at stolen inventory tomorrow, Kira said, to establish patterns. I know. If I help them, I might lead them to your people. I know that too. And if I don't help them, more vampires might die? Dominik moved then, closing the distance between them until he stood close enough that she could see the fine grain of his skin, the silver threading through his white hair. I won't ask you to lie for me. I won't ask you to compromise yourself. You owe me nothing. That's not true. Kira reached up, surprising herself, and touched his face. His skin was cool but not unpleasant, like marble that had been kept in shadow. I owe you honesty, and honestly, I don't want your people hunted. I don't want you in danger. His hand came up to cover hers, and she felt the careful control in his touch, the gentleness from something that could easily be dangerous. What will you do? I don't know yet, she admitted. Let me think. He nodded, then did something unexpected. He leaned down and pressed his forehead to hers, just for a moment, a gesture of trust and tenderness that made her throat tight. Be careful, he whispered. Then he was gone. Kira spent a sleepless night thinking. By morning she had the skeleton of a plan, reckless and probably foolish, but the only one she could live with. Detective Walsh was young, sharp-eyed, and clearly good at her job. She spread photographs across the conference room table, stolen atlases, surveyor maps, ancient nautical charts, all Eastern European, all showing the same regions as Dominik's atlas. We think there's a collector behind it, Walsh explained. Someone obsessed with vampire mythology. Half the maps have annotations about supposed vampire territories, safe routes, that kind of thing. Nonsense, obviously, but valuable nonsense to the right buyer. Obviously, Kira echoed, studying the photographs. Her pulse was steady. She'd made her choice. These are definitely valuable. 17th, 18th century mostly. The annotations are period appropriate, which increases worth significantly. Can you see a pattern in what's being taken? Kira pretended to examine them carefully, then shook her head. Not really. They're all from the same general region, but that could just be the thief's area of interest. Collectors often specialize. It wasn't quite a lie. There were patterns, clear ones, but she described them in ways that led nowhere useful. If anything comes to your attention, Walsh said, handing her a card, anything at all that seems connected, please call me. Of course. Kira left feeling shaky but resolved. She'd bought time, but not much. The hunters were clearly closing in, using stolen maps to locate vampire refuges, which meant she needed to do something the detective would never expect. She needed to make the maps wrong. Back at her shop, she examined Dominik's atlas with new eyes. The restoration was nearly complete, the pages stabilized, the ink refreshed. The marked routes were clear and accurate, too accurate. Kira pulled out fresh ink, period appropriate and carefully mixed to match the original. Then, with the steady hands that had restored countless damaged documents, she began to alter the maps. Not obviously, she was too skilled for that, but a cave marked here, she moved half an inch on the page, which translated to 5 miles in reality. A route through the mountains she adjusted to lead somewhere exposed, unusable. The symbols remained, but their locations shifted just enough to be worse than useless. They'd be dangerous, leading hunters to empty locations while the real refuge stayed hidden. It took her 3 days of painstaking work. She falsified purchase orders for the correct backing materials. She created a false trail of research into the original locations. If anyone ever questioned her restoration, she had documentation showing she'd been faithful to the source material. But the maps themselves now told beautiful, careful lies. Thursday came. She was shaking when Dominik arrived, the atlas spread before her on the workbench. "It's finished," she said. He approached slowly, his eyes moving over the restored pages. They were beautiful. She'd done some of her best work, the vellum glowing like honey, the ink rich and true. He studied them in silence for a long time. Then his fingers touched one of the marked caves, now relocated to a cliff face that would offer no shelter at all. His eyes lifted to hers. "What did you do?" Kira's heart hammered. "I moved them. All of them. The restoration is perfect, but the locations are false. If someone steals this, if hunters get their hands on it, they'll find nothing. Worse than nothing, they'll waste time in the wrong places." "You falsified historical documents." His voice was unreadable. "Yes." "You compromised your professional integrity." "Yes." "For me." "Not a question. For you. For your people." Kira stepped closer. "You said I owe you nothing. But that's not how this works. You don't get to tell me I'm allowed to stand by while people I care about are hunted." Dominik's expression shifted then, something cracking in that stoic facade. "People you care about." "Person," she corrected quietly. "Person I care about." He moved faster than she could track, suddenly close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. His hands came up to frame her face, trembling slightly. "Do you understand what you've done?" His voice was rough, more emotion in it than she'd ever heard. "Do you understand what this means? I protected you. You chose me." The words came out fierce, wondering. "Without being asked, without promise of reward. You looked at what mattered to me and decided it mattered to you too." "Yes." Kira covered his hands with hers. "Is that so surprising? I am a creature of darkness and death. I should not be." "You're someone who values history and preservation," she interrupted. "Someone who's been alone and careful and quiet for so long, you forgot how to let people in. Someone who left an umbrella behind because he was afraid to just ask if he could see me again." She smiled, feeling tears prick her eyes. "You're Dominik, and I don't care what else you are." He made a sound, something between a laugh and a sob, and then he was kissing her. It was gentle despite his obvious emotion, his cool lips careful against hers, his hands steady on her face. He kissed like someone who'd forgotten this was allowed, like someone savoring a miracle. Kira sank into it, her hands sliding up to his shoulders, feeling the solid reality of him. When they broke apart, she was breathless and he looked stunned. "I've wanted to do that," he said roughly, "since the 3rd time I saw you. You had ink on your cheek and you were arguing with a supplier about the thread count of Japanese tissue paper. That was a very important argument. You were magnificent." Kira laughed, slightly dizzy. "So what happens now?" Dominik's expression sobered. "Now I take these maps and distribute them through our networks. Let them fall into hunters' hands through channels that won't trace back to you, and I make sure you're protected." "Protected from what?" "From anyone who might question the restoration, from hunters who might realize the maps are false, from any threat that might touch you because of what you've done for us." His voice went hard. "You're under my protection now, Kira Jensen. That's not negotiable." "Awfully high-handed," she said, but she was smiling. "I'm a king. It's my nature." He said it matter-of-factly, and she blinked. "You're a what now?" "The vampire king of the Western Territories. Did I not mention that?" "No, Dominik, you definitely did not mention that." He had the grace to look slightly sheepish. It seemed presumptuous to lead with. Kira started laughing, couldn't stop. "I falsified maps for vampire royalty. My thesis advisor would die. I'd rather he didn't. I don't need the attention." But Dominik was almost smiling again, and Kira felt warmth bloom in her chest. "So what does that make me?" she asked. Am I dating a king? Are we dating? Well, we'd better be after that kiss. Something blazed in his eyes, joy, pure and simple. Then yes, you're dating a king, if that's acceptable. I suppose I can adjust my expectations accordingly. She reached up and straightened his collar, enjoying the way he went still under her touch. Does this mean you have a castle? A court, yes. Underground, beneath the city. You'd be welcome there. After dark, I assume. Always after dark. His hand came up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. There are limitations to what I can offer you, Kira. I can't walk in sunlight. I can't share meals with you. I can't grow old alongside you. But you can restore atlases with me. You can talk to me about Renaissance cartography. You can leave umbrellas behind and come back for them. She caught his hand, pressed it against her cheek. You can kiss me again. That I can do. And he did, slower this time. Deeper, until she forgot about anything beyond the feel of him, the taste of him, the way his hands held her like she was precious. When her phone rang, they broke apart reluctantly. She checked the screen. Detective Walsh. I should answer this, she said. Dominik nodded, stepping back but not far, his hand finding hers. Miss Jensen? Walsh here. Wanted to give you an update. We recovered another stolen atlas this morning from a raid. Thing is, the thieves were using it to scout locations, and they all turned up empty. We're starting to think someone's been feeding the collector bad information. Kira kept her voice steady. Bad information? Yeah, like falsified maps. Someone good enough to make them look authentic, but sending people to the wrong places. Thought I should warn you there might be forgeries circulating in the market. I'll keep an eye out. Thank you for letting me know. No problem. Stay safe out there. Kira hung up and looked at Dominik. It's working. They found one of the maps and the hunters came up empty. Good. His hand tightened on hers. I'll make sure more reach them. With any luck, they'll waste months chasing shadows. And your people will be safe. Safer. There's always risk, but you've given us an advantage we haven't had in years. He pulled her close again, his forehead resting against hers. I owe you everything. You owe me another date, Kira corrected. A proper one, where we actually talk instead of just looking at maps. I'm not good at talking. I've noticed, but you're getting better. She smiled up at him. Plus, I like the quiet. I spend all day with fragile things that require careful attention. You're not so different. Are you calling me fragile? But his tone was warm, almost teasing. I'm calling you worth the patience. She kissed his jaw, feeling him shiver. So, date. You pick the place, as long as it's after dark. There's a garden, he said after a moment, in the court, underground, but we've cultivated it over centuries. Bioluminescent plants, imported flowers that bloom in darkness. It's beautiful in ways the surface world has never seen. I want to see it. Tomorrow night? Tomorrow night, she agreed. He left reluctantly, taking the atlas with him, but the umbrella stayed propped by the door. Their umbrella now, really. The excuse that had become something real. The underground garden took Kira's breath away. The entrance was hidden beneath an old warehouse in industrial southeast Portland, but once through the concealed door and down the stone staircase, she entered another world. The cavern was enormous, its ceiling lost in shadow, but everywhere she looked, there was light, soft blue glows from mushroom clusters, gentle green luminescence from trailing vines, purple flowers that pulsed like heartbeats. Water trickled somewhere in the darkness, and the air smelled like earth and growing things. Dominik had been waiting for her at the bottom of the stairs, dressed in what she was coming to recognize as his version of casual. Black shirt, dark trousers, his white hair loose. He looked more relaxed here, she realized. This was his territory, his home. It's incredible, she breathed, turning in a slow circle. We've worked on it for 300 years. Pride colored his voice. Every vampire court needs a sanctuary, a place that's wholly ours. This is ours. He led her down paths lined with stones that gleamed like opals, past pools of water that reflected the bioluminescent light like captured stars. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, their shoulders brushing. Tell me about it, Kira said eventually. The court, your people. Dominik was quiet for a moment, and she thought he might deflect. Then, there are 743 of us in the Western Territories. We've been here since before Lewis and Clark, before the Oregon Trail, before the first settlements. We came seeking the same thing humans did: new territory, new chances. The forests are deep here. The winter's mild enough. It suits us. 743 exactly? We keep careful count. Every life matters when you can live for centuries, but creating new vampires is dangerous and regulated. He paused by a flowering vine that glowed soft gold. I was turned in 1523. I've been king since 1687. Kira did the math and felt dizzy. You're over 500 years old. Yes, he glanced at her. Does that frighten you? No, it makes me sad. That surprised him. Why? Because you've been alone for so much of it. She touched his hand. You said you haven't wanted to know someone this much in decades. How long has it really been? His fingers laced through hers. The last time I allowed myself to care for someone, truly care, was 1843. She was human, a painter. She knew what I was and didn't fear it. His voice went distant. She grew old. I didn't. I held her hand when she died at 73, and I swore I wouldn't do that again. Wouldn't watch someone I love fade while I remain unchanged. Dominik. Kira stopped walking, turning to face him fully. Is that why you've been so careful with me? So slow? I wanted to see you. I couldn't seem to stop myself from coming back, from leaving that damn umbrella, from finding excuses. He cupped her face with both hands. But I told myself I'd keep distance, that I'd protect myself, that I wouldn't let it become what it's becoming. And what is it becoming? Everything I swore I wouldn't allow. The confession came out rough. I'm falling in love with you, Kira Jensen. Have been since you talked about gaps in maps being important, since you kept the umbrella and smiled when I came back for it, since you falsified historical documents to protect people you'd never met because they mattered to me. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm falling in love with you too. I know it's fast. I know it's probably crazy, but he kissed her, silencing the doubts. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. It's not crazy. Time means something different when you've had centuries of it. I know the difference between infatuation and recognition. I recognize you, Kira. I recognize your soul. Then stop protecting yourself from me. She gripped his shirt, holding him close. I know what I'm choosing. I know you'll outlive me, but I'd rather have decades with you than a lifetime of safety without you. Decades, he repeated, something strange in his voice. Unless you get tired of me sooner. That will never happen. He said it with absolute certainty. But Kira, there are options, ways for you to have more than decades. She understood immediately. You mean turning me? I would never ask it, never pressure it. It's your choice, always. His thumbs brushed away her tears. But yes, if you wanted it, eventually, when you were ready, I could give you eternity. The weight of it settled over her. I'm not ready to think about that yet. I know. I just wanted you to know it exists, that if you choose me, you don't have to choose ending. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. I'm very good at patience. I've noticed, she smiled against his chest. Can we just be us for now? Date, spend time together, see where this goes? That sounds perfect. They walked deeper into the garden, and Dominik told her stories about the court, about vampire politics and the careful balance they maintained with the human world. Kira told him about her work, about the maps she'd restored and the stories they told. At one point they passed another vampire, a woman with silver-white hair and eyes like amber. She took one look at them, at their joined hands, at the way Dominik's expression had softened and smiled. So the umbrella worked, she said. Dominik actually looked embarrassed. Vivian, oh, don't give me that look. You asked for advice on how to see her again without being too forward, and I told you to leave something behind. The vampire Vivian grinned at Kira. I'm glad you kept it. He was insufferable, moping around the court after each visit. I did not mope, Dominik protested. You absolutely moped. You stood by the window watching the clock until it was time to visit her shop. Vivian's expression gentled. It's good to see you happy, old friend. You've been alone too long. She left them with a knowing smile, and Kira tried not to laugh at Dominik's discomfort. You moped? I may have been eager to see you. You left an umbrella behind because you couldn't figure out how to just ask me to dinner. In my defense, I haven't courted anyone in nearly 2 centuries. I'm out of practice. He pulled her close, his arms around her waist. Also, you're terrifying. I'm terrifying? You have this way of looking at things, really seeing them. I was afraid you'd see me and find me wanting. Kira's heart melted. She reached up and pulled his face down to hers, kissing him thoroughly. You're not wanting. You're exactly what I want. They stayed in the garden for hours, talking and kissing and simply being together. When Dominik finally walked her back to the surface, dawn was a few hours away. Will you come to the shop tomorrow? She asked. I mean tonight. My schedule is going to get confusing. Every Thursday, he promised, and any other night you'll have me. All of them, then. His smile was radiant, boyish almost, and she fell a little bit more in love with him. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that felt like music. Kira worked her days in the shop, restoring maps and documents, building her business. Her nights belonged to Dominik dinners at restaurants he'd arranged to rent out after hours, walks through the city in the darkness, visits to the underground court where she was learning faces and names, being welcomed as their king's chosen. The falsified maps continued to circulate. Detective Walsh called periodically with updates, more dead ends, more frustrated hunters, more evidence that someone was feeding them false information. Kira maintained her innocent confusion, and the detective eventually stopped calling. But the hunters didn't stop hunting. It was December, 3 months into their relationship, when the attack came. Kira was closing up the shop, bundling herself into her coat and reaching for the umbrella, always the umbrella, even though she had others now when the door burst open. 3 men, armed with stakes and crossbows. The weapons looked medieval and ridiculous until she saw the absolute conviction in their eyes. Where are they? The lead hunter demanded. He was tall, scarred, with the look of someone who'd seen too much. The Vampire King. We know he's been here. Kira's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. I don't know what you're talking about. We've been watching. He comes here every week. You're helping them, falsifying the maps. The hunter moved closer and she saw the stake in his hand, wood stained dark with what might have been blood. Tell us where they shelter, and you live. Simple as that. I restore old maps, that's all I do. Liar. He grabbed her arm and she gasped at the painful grip. You think we haven't noticed the pattern? Every map that's been recovered leads nowhere. Someone with skill has been altering them, and you're the best restorer in the Northwest. Kira tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. The other 2 hunters were spreading out, searching the shop, pulling maps off the walls. Let her go. Dominik's voice came from the doorway, soft and absolutely lethal. He stood silhouetted against the streetlights, his white hair loose, his eyes blazing silver. He looked every inch the predator he was, and the hunters froze. Then all 3 aimed their weapons at him. The Vampire King himself, the lead hunter said. Even better. Dominik moved. One moment he was in the doorway, the next he was inside, faster than Kira's eyes could track. The crossbow bolt meant for his heart shattered against the wall. He disarmed the first hunter with a casual twist, sent the second flying into a bookshelf. The lead hunter still had hold of Kira. He pressed the stake against her throat. Move again and she dies. Dominik went absolutely still. The rage in his expression was terrifying, ancient and cold. If you harm one hair on her head, I will make sure your death takes months. Big talk for a dead man. The hunter's hand was shaking, Kira realized. He was terrified but desperate. Call off your kind. Stop the attacks on our families. We don't attack families. Dominik's voice was ice. We have laws. We feed carefully from the willing from blood banks. We haven't killed a human in this territory in over a century. Liar. My brother was killed by rogues. A new voice entered the fray. Vivian stepped through the door, flanked by 2 other vampires. Rogues we've been hunting ourselves. You're targeting the wrong people. How do we know that's true? But the hunter's conviction was wavering. Because we're offering to help you hunt them. Vivian moved forward slowly, hands visible and empty. 3 rogues, turned without permission, feeding without discretion. They're making us all targets. Give us the location of your brother's death, and we'll track them. The hunter looked between Vivian and Dominik, clearly torn. The stake pressed harder against Kira's throat, and she winced. Dominik's control shattered. He moved again, and this time Kira felt herself pulled from the hunter's grip and tucked against Dominik's chest. The hunter was on the ground, Dominik's hand around his throat. Don't kill him, Kira gasped. Dominik, please, don't. The plea cut through his rage. Dominik's hand loosened fractionally. Give me one reason why not. Because he's in pain, because he lost his brother, because killing him makes you what he thinks you are. Kira touched Dominik's arm. Please. For a long, terrible moment, she thought he wouldn't listen. Then he released the hunter and stepped back, gathering Kira close. Vivian took over, helping the hunter up, talking in low, calm tones. The other two hunters watched warily, but the violence had drained from the room. We're not your enemy, Vivian said. But we can't help you if you won't let us. Give us a chance to prove we're hunting the same threat. The lead hunter looked at Kira, still held protectively in Dominik's arms. She's human. You care about her. More than my own existence, Dominik said flatly. Then you understand what it is to want to protect what you love. The hunter's shoulders sagged. My brother was all I had. Then let us give you justice for him. Vivian extended her hand. Work with us, not against us. After a long moment, the hunter took it. The next hour was tense but productive. The hunters provided details about the attack on the brother location, time frame, description of the vampires involved. Vivian and her companions cross-referenced it with their own intelligence about rogue activity. We know them, she said finally. 3 turned by a vampire we executed for treason 2 years ago. They've been operating independently, breaking every law we have. We've been trying to track them for months. Help us find them, the lead hunter said, and we'll call off the campaign. Spread the word that the Vampire King's court isn't the threat. Agreed. Vivian glanced at Dominik. We'll organize a hunt, combined forces. Dominik nodded curtly, but his attention was on Kira, his hands running over her gently, checking for injuries. Are you hurt? No. You got here in time. She touched the spot where the stake had pressed, finding it tender but unbroken. How did you know to come? I always know when it's Thursday. A ghost of his usual almost smile, and I felt wrong, worried. I came early. Good instincts. She hugged him tightly, feeling him shake slightly with residual fear and rage. The hunters left with Vivian and the others, planning their joint operation. Dominik locked the door behind them and pulled Kira into his arms properly. I nearly killed him, he said into her hair. I nearly lost control completely. But you didn't. You listened to me. Because you asked. Because your voice is the only thing that could have reached me in that moment. He pulled back to look at her, his eyes haunted. This is why I stayed alone, Kira. This is the danger I bring to anyone I care about. No, she gripped his face, making him meet her eyes. Those men came here because of choices they made, because of rogues breaking your laws, not because of you, not because of us. They could have killed you. They could have. But you saved me. Your people saved me. She kissed him softly. I'm not going anywhere, Dominik. I'm not afraid of your world. You should be. Well, I'm not. I'm stubborn that way. Despite everything, he almost smiled. I've noticed. They stayed in the shop that night, neither wanting to be apart. Dominik called in reports from the joint hunt the rogues had been found in an abandoned warehouse, put down after a brutal fight. The lead hunter, a man Kira now knew was named Marcus, had been injured but survived. He'd kept his word about calling off the broader campaign. It's not a permanent solution, Dominik said, watching the rain streak down the shop windows. There will always be rogues, always be hunters who don't care about the truth. But it's better than it was yesterday. Kira leaned against him, both of them watching the storm. That's how change happens, incrementally. When did you become wise? I work with old things. They teach patience. He kissed the top of her head. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. Good. They stood in comfortable silence, and Kira found her gaze drifting to the umbrella by the door. Their umbrella. The excuse that had brought them together. Do you ever regret it? She asked, leaving the umbrella that first day. Never. It was the best decision I've made in 5 centuries. Dominik turned her to face him. I was lonely, Kira. I'd been lonely for so long I'd forgotten what the alternative felt like. And then you kept my umbrella and smiled. And I remembered. Remembered what? What it felt like to want to come home to someone. Her eyes stung with tears. This is home? My tiny shop? Anywhere you are is home, he said it simply, like it was obvious. I have a court, a territory, responsibilities that span centuries. But when I'm here with you, surrounded by your maps and your careful work and the smell of conservation adhesive, I feel more myself than I have anywhere else." Kira kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it. When they broke apart, she whispered, "I love you. I love you." He said it like a prayer, like a vow. "I'll love you through whatever time we have, mortal or otherwise." "I'm starting to think I might want otherwise," Kira admitted. "Eventually. Not now, but someday. I want to see where this goes. I want centuries of Thursday evenings and falsified maps and stolen kisses." Joy broke across his face like sunrise. "Someday. When you're ready." "When I'm ready," she agreed. The weeks turned into months. Winter gave way to spring, and Kira's shop became something of a neutral ground, a place where vampires and hunters could meet under truce to coordinate against rogue threats. Marcus became a regular visitor, his initial hostility transforming into grudging respect and eventually friendship. "Never thought I'd be having coffee with the Vampire King's girlfriend," he said one afternoon, watching Dominik examine a new acquisition. "Never thought I'd be the Vampire King's girlfriend," Kira replied, smiling as Dominik's lips twitched. "You're good for him. He's less terrifying these days." "I'm exactly as terrifying as I've always been," Dominik said without looking up. "You smile now? It's deeply unsettling." Dominik did smile then, and Marcus shook his head in wonder. "Yeah, that. Unsettling." But his tone was warm, and when he left, he clasped Dominik's arm in a gesture of respect. The shop thrived. Kira's reputation grew, ironically enough because of the falsified maps, though no one knew they were false. She was known as the restorer who could bring the most damaged documents back to life, and her schedule filled months in advance. Dominik was there for it all. Thursday evenings remained sacred, but he came other nights too, helping her with detail work, sharing comfortable silence, occasionally sweeping her away to the underground court for gatherings that grew more familiar each time. She met the Vampire Council, 7 ancient vampires who governed alongside Dominik. They were wary at first. A human so close to their king was unprecedented in recent centuries, but Kira won them over the same way she'd won Dominik, with patience, genuine interest, and steady competence. A year passed, then another. Kira's life had transformed into something she couldn't have imagined that first rainy evening when a pale stranger had walked into her shop and left an umbrella behind. It was their 2-year anniversary measured from that first Thursday, because neither of them could remember the exact date they had started calling it love when Dominik brought her to a new part of the underground court. "I wanted to show you something," he said, leading her through passages she'd never explored. They emerged into a vast chamber, and Kira gasped. It had been transformed into a workshop, a mirror of her shop above, but larger, more elaborate. Restoration tools laid out with precision, storage for maps and documents, even the same kind of magnifying lamp she preferred. "What is this?" "A place for you. Here, in the court." Dominik watched her explore, his expression careful. "If you wanted it, you could work here sometimes on projects that require discretion, vampire archives that need preservation, historical documents we've kept hidden for centuries." Kira turned to face him, understanding dawning. "You're asking me to be part of this world, officially." "I'm asking if you want to be." He came closer. "You'd still have your shop, your human life. But this would be here too, a bridge between both worlds. And eventually?" She touched his face. "When I'm ready for more than bridges." "Eventually, if you choose it, this could be your workshop for centuries." His voice went rough. "I'm not pressuring. I'll love you, mortal or immortal, for however long we have, but I wanted you to know there's a place for you here. There's always been a place for you here." Kira looked around the workshop, imagining centuries of work, of preservation, of bringing damaged histories back to life, imagining doing it all with Dominik beside her, time stretching out like the maps they restored. "I'm ready," she said. He went still. "Ready? To be turned, to choose eternity with you." She smiled at his shocked expression. "I've been thinking about it for months. I love my work, but I love you more. And the work will always be there. Vampires have centuries of archives that need care. I could spend lifetimes doing what I love, with who I love." Kira. He pulled her close, and she felt him trembling. Are you certain? Once done, it can't be undone. I'm certain. I choose you. I choose this. She kissed him. I choose us. The turning happened a week later, giving her time to settle her affairs, to transition her shop to a manager she trusted, to prepare. The Vampire Council witnessed it, a formal ritual in the depths of the court. Dominik had explained the process carefully, his blood, then her death, then her rebirth. Her. It would hurt, he'd warned, but he'd be there through all of it. When the moment came, Kira wasn't afraid. She lay in Dominik's arms in their private chambers, surrounded by soft light and softer blankets. I love you, she said, just before his fangs pierced her throat. I love you, he whispered back, through this and beyond. The pain was intense but brief. Then came darkness, vast and complete. Kira drifted in it, aware of Dominik's presence like a star in the void, guiding her back. When she woke, the world had transformed. Everything was sharper sounds, scents, the feeling of silk sheets against her skin. Dominik's face above her was more beautiful than she'd ever seen it, every detail crystalline and perfect. Hello, he said softly. Hello? Her voice sounded different, clearer. Did it work? Look. He handed her a mirror. Kira studied her reflection. Her skin had paled to porcelain, her eyes brightened to a vivid green. Her hair seemed darker against her new complexion. She looked like herself, but elevated, like a painting brought to full saturation. I'm beautiful, she said, wondering. You were always beautiful. Now the world can see it as I do. Dominik kissed her forehead. How do you feel? She took stock. Hungry, definitely, but also strong, aware, more present in her body than she'd ever been. Alive? Which is ironic. He laughed, the sound pure joy. Welcome to immortality, Kira Jensen. Kira Draven, she corrected, if you'll have me. His expression went soft. Are you proposing? I suppose I am. We've done everything else backwards, might as well get married after I'm already undead. Then yes, he kissed her properly. Yes to everything. Yes to forever. The wedding happened in the underground garden where he'd first told her he was falling in love with her. The entire court attended, along with Marcus and a handful of other hunters who'd become allies. Vivian officiated, grinning the entire time. Kira wore white silk and carried a bouquet of bioluminescent flowers. Dominik wore black and silver, his white hair braided with threads of moonstone. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promising patience and preservation, love and loyalty, centuries of Thursday evenings. When Dominik kissed her, his wife, his queen, his partner in eternity, the court erupted in celebration. The party lasted until dawn, which Kira experienced for the last time from underground, safe in the shelter of her new home. She didn't mourn the sun, not when she had starlight in Dominik's eyes, not when she had eternity to explore the darkness with him. Years passed, decades. Kira's workshop became renowned in vampire circles, her restoration work sought after by courts around the world. She and Dominik traveled together, visiting ancient libraries and hidden archives, bringing damaged histories back to life. They returned to Portland often, to the court that was home, to the shop that still operated under new management but kept a special room for the original owner. The umbrella hung there still, blue silk faded now but carefully preserved. Visitors to the shop sometimes asked about it. Oh, that, the manager would say, smiling. That's the umbrella that started everything. They never explained further. Some stories were too precious to share completely. On Thursday evenings, Kira and Dominik would sometimes visit the shop after hours, sitting among the maps and memories, talking or simply existing in comfortable silence. Do you ever regret it? Kira asked one such evening, a century into their marriage. Dominik looked at her, his wife and queen, still as beautiful to him as the first moment he'd seen her. Leaving the umbrella? Any of it. Never. He pulled her close. Best decision I ever made. Kira leaned into him, content. Outside, rain fell on the Portland streets, the same rain that had been falling the first night they met. Inside, surrounded by maps of worlds long gone and worlds yet to be discovered, they sat together. Time stretched ahead of them, vast and welcoming. There would be challenges, there always were. Rogues to hunt, politics to navigate, the slow, inevitable changes of centuries passing. But they'd face them together. the restorer and the king, the human who'd chosen immortality and the vampire who'd prayed for her return. All because of an umbrella, left behind on purpose, kept safe as a promise. Their forever had started with that small gesture of hope, and it would continue, Thursday after Thursday, century after century. For as long as stars shone in the darkness and rain fell on city streets, and two people chose each other over and over again. In the underground court, in the workshop filled with ancient maps and careful tools, Kira and Dominik built their life together. They restored documents that had survived wars and floods, that had been hidden in castle walls and buried in forgotten graves. Each map told a story of survival, of navigation, of finding one's way through unknown territory. Just like them. Marcus visited sometimes, aging gracefully while they remained unchanged. His children came to know them, and his grandchildren, each generation maintaining the alliance between hunters and the vampire king's court. "You were right," Marcus told Kira during one visit, his hair gone silver, his hands less steady, but his mind still sharp. "That first night, when you told Dominik not to kill me, you said I was in pain, that killing me would make him what I feared. You saved my life with that." "You saved mine too," Kira replied, "by choosing to listen, by choosing trust over fear." "We all saved each other," Marcus smiled. "That's how it works, isn't it? Choose connection over isolation, and everything changes." When Marcus died peacefully at 93, surrounded by family, Kira and Dominik attended the funeral from the shadows. They couldn't be seen too many questions about why they hadn't aged in 70 years, but they were there. "He was a good man," Dominik said as they watched the casket lowered. "He was, because he chose to be." Kira laced her fingers through his. "Because we all chose differently than we might have." They walked home through the pre-dawn darkness, returning to the court before the sun could threaten. The underground passages felt more like home with each passing year. The bioluminescent gardens blooming in cycles, Kira had learned to read like seasons. In their chambers, surrounded by books and maps and centuries of accumulated memories, they lay together in the darkness. "Tell me a story," Kira said, a ritual they'd developed. "Tell me about before." So Dominik told her about Vienna in the 1600s, about Constantinople before it became Istanbul, about places and times that existed now only in memory and the maps they preserved. And Kira listened, adding his stories to the collection she was building. Someday, she'd write them down, create an archive of his long life, their long lives now. But for tonight, it was enough to listen, to exist together in the quiet darkness, to know that Thursday would come again, and they'd mark it in their own private way, with restoration work and stolen kisses, and the comfortable silence of two people who'd found each other against all odds. The umbrella still hung in the old shop, a reminder and a promise. She'd left it as a reason to return. He'd been praying for exactly that. And from that simple exchange, hope meeting hope, need meeting need. They'd built something that would outlast empires, outlast ages, outlast everything but the love that had brought them together. In the end, that was the best map of all. Not one that showed terrain or borders, but one that charted the distance between loneliness and connection, between isolation and love, between two people who'd been brave enough to leave something behind and wise enough to keep what they found. They navigated it together, Thursday after Thursday, through centuries of darkness and light, always finding their way home to each other. Always.